Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Hackett, and I am the Global Program Director for Cipher. Today, I was excited to moderate our panel discussion on the future of connected devices. I am joined by my colleague, Scott Krosky, the Global Chief Information Security Officer for Cipher, as well as Greg Kuhn, who is the Director of IoT for Prosegur USA. Both Scott, Greg, and I all come from Long Island, New York. Scott and Greg, how are you today?
Doing good, Pete. Thanks.
Very good, guys. Thanks for having me.
We're really appreciative of your time today, both of you. And for our audience, we at Cipher and Prosegur envision a very near future that is full digitalization of the real world and the virtual world. Every vehicle, every machine, every device, and everything will be connected through billions of sensors connected on every device. They will be precisely describing their state, whereby each physical device will have a digital twin in the virtual world. This fully digital world will be a reality in the next year or two. We saw the same type of transformation of personal smart devices when Apple introduced the first iPhone a decade ago. And as you can see on this chart, the yellow bar graph saw an exponential increase in addition of smartphones, tablets, and other personal mobile computing systems between 2010 and 2018. In addition, with the emergence of the 5G communication grid, we anticipate the framework will be laid out to allow for organizations to rapidly adopt IoT devices to support their business objectives. Medical devices, manufacturing systems, security cameras, temperature readers, smart homes, and smart utility systems will be everywhere in the next few years. And in the next 2 years, many research firms anticipate anywhere between 14 and 20 billion IoT devices connected to the internet. So for today's discussion, I'd like to frame two separate but related conversations. First, I want to showcase how a large enterprise is using IoT devices to transform their service delivery. And Greg works at Prosegur, and they have very ambitious goals to infuse IoT devices into their services. And for the second topic, I want to discuss some of the cybersecurity challenges related to IoT devices and how Cipher is posturing to be a leader in the security of IoT devices. And Scott will focus on this topic. And with that, let's first turn to Greg. Greg, can you go into some detail about how Prosegur is currently using IoT devices to deliver their private security services?
Sure, Pete. We really focus on a number of different types of devices, whether it's wired, wireless, whatever fits the application. But we focus on devices that help to add context to what a customer is looking to do within their security environment. So whether it's environmental, measuring temperature, measuring humidity, measuring, all those environmental variables that can have an impact on what they're doing, whether it's, different sensors for things like gunshot detection, radar detection, a number of other, things that we can measure with unique sensor types, or whether it's using cameras and other sensors that, we have already in their existing security environments, and leveraging some of the analytics that we can run on those devices to be able to collect metadata from them and run further analytics, so that we can, again, add context and add meaning to what's happening within their environment, so they can make more intelligent decisions on how to react or how to preempt a certain event from happening.
Yeah, Greg, that's a great summary of how Prosegur uses IoT devices today. And following the initial few months of the global pandemic, how exactly did Prosegur shift their IoT device utilization to support the challenges of returning to work?
Sure. Returning to work was definitely a challenge for everybody, right? Definitely here in the New York area and across the globe.
Still is globally. Yeah, still is globally. With a lot of companies going to work, coming out of work, and hey, luckily here from Cipher, we're getting ready to go back into the office next week, which is going to be kind of nice. But I've been to a couple of client offices already, and have seen some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. We were able to come back and maintain socially distant meaning to how we worked and how we did all that. Part of that comes into when we look at those cameras that we were just talking about and some of the analytics that we can run and say, okay, person X and person Y are definitely 6 feet apart, right? Or use some of those analytics to help with contact tracing to determine, okay, individual X may have been, patient 0, right? Who did they come in contact in their day-to-day at the office? But kind of even before that, before they enter the office, right? So moving towards smart devices that allow for contactless entry, contactless access control, contactless turnstiles, and a number of different things that allow us to kind of gate people, allow certain occupancy rules to be, abided by, and that type of stuff to monitor and measure how many people were coming and going, and making sure that we were in compliance at the same time. So a lot went into that, and we're still innovating and coming up with new ways to continue to do that.
Yeah, and speaking about innovation, Greg, can you talk a little bit about some of the innovation efforts that ProScore is pursuing today regarding the adoption of IoT devices for services in the near future?
Absolutely. A piece of my team is really focusing on this, Pete and Scott, because it's really important, right? How do we take some of the sensors that we have out there and how do we validate some of the data and add context, to that meaning, like we were talking about before. So taking some of that data and ensuring that it's meaningful, ensuring that it's trustworthy, ensuring that we can do with it what we want to do with it once it gets to that analytic stage is really important. So we've done a lot around aggregating that data, a lot around encrypting and ensuring that data is viable and good to use, right, in some of those calculations. That's just the software side of it, which is really important. The hardware side of it too, developing new sensors every day, developing new ways to integrate sensors into unique environments, harsh environments, which is really important. Everything from critical infrastructure to retail to commercial buildings in general. We have solutions for, and we're developing new every day. So a lot goes into that.
Yeah, Greg, can I ask you a quick question? I was actually curious about that too. So what do you find more challenging, just from integrating from a software perspective or a hardware perspective?
There's unique challenges for both, Scott, right? Hardware can get tricky because you can work all day on a prototype, and once you've got it, right, it's sometimes really exciting for some of our developers. Look what we just created, right? But then you say, okay, how do I go build 10,000 of these and install them across the country?
Right, scalability problem at that point. You got to partner with manufacturers to be able to scale it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we do, and sometimes we have the ability to do that in-house. So that's really great. With software, there's some of those types of challenges that are a little bit easier, but you run into more on the cyber side, right? How do you validate that this is secure? How do we test it? How do we do all that? And there's a portion of our lab that's dedicated to just doing that function and working with, you guys, of course, to make sure that everything is buttoned up and working as described.
Yeah, I can tell you all about the software side. I think we're actually getting right into that here in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, that's okay, Scott. No worries. It's actually a good segue. So focusing on cybersecurity for IoT devices. So Scott, how does securing IoT devices differ from traditional IoT systems?
Yeah, Pete. So that chart that we showed earlier is actually really important because we consider the IoT device to be unmanaged, right? Traditional IT systems, you can ensure the security of those systems by doing a couple things. You could join them to a domain. You can enforce certain security policies on them that they have to follow. You could even install software on them like advanced antivirus or endpoint protection or endpoint detection and response, EDR software on it to really monitor, look at malicious activity and be able to block that activity on the endpoint itself. The problem with the IoT devices is the majority of these are engineered specifically to complete or to do one or two tasks, and that's really about it. And a lot of them are portable, they're mobile, they have to operate under certain energy constraints. So you can't dedicate a ton of CPU memory utilization. A lot of that's not just possible in these devices. I mean, imagine a small device that's supposed to have a battery life of 24 to 48 hours. Well, you can't have a quantum computer, you can't have a supercomputer inside this device because it's just going to drain the energy.
Right.
So they're very, very small and they're very, very dedicated to one or two tasks. So you can't do the same things that you would normally do from traditional IT security. So you have to approach it from a different perspective.
Yeah, and therein lies the challenge, right?
That's exactly right.
So what is Scott? So what is Cipher currently doing today to provide cybersecurity services for IoT devices?
So we have our yellow box offering, which is okay. These are if you have IoT devices that sit inside a dedicated network, i.e. they're not roaming around on the cellular network or anything like that. If they're like fixed-based IP cameras, access control systems, anything that's within an office that's being used, kind of the things that Greg had talked about before about the offices. And we deploy yellow box into that environment to protect it. And what is yellow box exactly? So yellow box is it's advanced.
It's yellow. It's yellow.
It's for yellow, yeah. yellow for processor, right?
Exactly.
We all know that.
Yeah.
So it's actually a packaged up suite. So it's next generation antivirus, or excuse me, next generation firewall for some of the devices inside the environment that are management, like maybe a DVR server that's recording, or maybe
Mhm.
a workstation that's managing these IoT devices. We'll deploy endpoint protection to there. But really, the key differentiator for us is that our yellow box environment sits within an ecosystem, and we have this cyber intelligence orchestration platform called Portalan that infuses intelligence into those devices. And what we have that we've stood up is actually an IoT and an ESS honeypot. And that honeypot is deployed out there on the internet to look at specific attack techniques that are directed at those IoT devices. So case in point here, let's say Cipher has today, let's pick a dozen of our customers, and they're all running, a specific type of IP-based camera. If they're under yellow box protection, as those devices are targeted by a cyber actor that's looking to conduct malicious activity against those devices, the yellow boxes at the perimeter recognizes that information, intercepts that information, actually proxies that information to our honeypot instead. And the honeypot then begins to mimic that IoT device. So we've just intercepted the traffic and have redirected it to our honeypot. And then the honeypot will then begin communicating back to that threat actor, learning what it is that threat actor is attempting to do with the device, eventually allowing access to the device. And once you've gained access to the device, what can you do from there? What is the threat actor doing once they've logged into the device? What are they doing? Where are they coming from? Those types of things. And then that threat intelligence is curated and then pushed to all of our yellow boxes in the ecosystem. So if you're customer A and you're being probed, your IoT devices are being probed, we recognize that information, we collect the threat intelligence, and then now we push it to customer B, C, D, E, and F as well too at the same time. So that way everybody shares that information across our ecosystem. So that's kind of our yellow box offering today. That we went out to. We worked with Prosegur on that. We have that available for companies that are interested in putting IoT systems under protection from that perspective. So that's kind of what we have today.
Yeah. Yeah, Scott, one of the things that you mentioned, I think, is really, really important, for our viewers to understand. And we've kind of mentioned this on some of our podcasts, which we do on a weekly basis, and a couple of other LinkedIn live sessions. But, you mentioned, our threat intelligence or cyber intelligence. So for our viewers out there, who haven't listened before or viewed before, we have our cyber intelligence team located in Coimbra, Portugal, which, and that's where we get, a lot of our intelligence that goes into these systems that Scott was describing before. So it's a very unique team, and I think it's one of our differentiators here at Cipher. So I just wanted to let our audience know that. So Scott and Greg, what is the future of IoT device security? I'd like to get both of you to respond to this, and I guess let's start with Scott first. What do you think, Scott?
So we at Cipher have engaged. So we've this year we've done what we call an open innovation project that we've partnered with Prosegur on. We had a challenge that we pushed out to the public to bid on. So we looked for startups that are out across the world. We had plenty of startups apply for the challenge. And our challenge was pretty simple. It was, how do you ensure the trustworthiness of IoT devices? How do you establish that initially when an IoT device is brought onto a network? And then how do you continuously monitor for that trust and identify when there's an attribute or a couple different attributes that change that no longer allow you to trust that device? So we had 47 applicants that applied for that challenge. I want to say it was in June that we judged all the applications. We found 8 companies in which we thought had a pretty unique way of attacking that. So we interviewed them. We got an understanding of the way that their solution worked, and then we actually had 3 of them which we shortlisted and actually invited them to pitch to the Prosegur CEO, the Prosegur COO, our boss, Ed Bucas, who's the CEO of Cipher, as well as some of the other innovation team members in out of Madrid and here in New York, and pitch their solutions. So we selected one. We selected a company by the name of Ubrick, which we've pushed out on our LinkedIn feeds as well as newsletters. And Ubrick's got a really interesting way of addressing this challenge. So we're developing a pilot project right now with inside Prosegur to be able to do that. And so how exactly does that work? I don't want to give all the specifics away, obviously, at this point, but It's through a very, very, very lightweight agent that's deployed on an IoT device, and it serves two purposes. It does two functions. The first is it conducts cryptography of every packet on that, so it's encrypting the packet prior to its transmission across the internet, wherever that is. And second, it uses a blockchain technology to take not only the content of the data packet that's being transmitted, but all the metadata and attributes about that IoT device. So what is the make, model, firmware running, who's logged into the device at this point in time, if there's, if it's reading a temperature, what's the temperature reader, if it's GPS, what are the GPS coordinates, is it expected to be where it's at? All that information is combined and signed and then put into the public blockchain ledger, so that way you can validate that device at this date and time created this packet, and then we can stream that packet. So if it's a live video stream, we can encrypt that. If it's maybe a smart lock that's in this state, if it's in an open state and then somebody closed it, what was that? Whatever the data is, it doesn't matter. We can validate that through blockchain that device actually did transmit what it said that it transmitted. So that way, if somebody were to spoof that device or spoof the traffic or be able to intercept the traffic and change it through that ledger, we can validate that if it's either correct or not correct at that point. So that's kind of the way in which we thought that was a pretty interesting way to approach this problem set. And we've partnered with them. So we're definitely looking forward to developing the prototype here, probably in March of 2021. Should have something ready to be able to begin to go to as a minimal viable product.
Yeah, that sounds like a really innovative approach to dealing with the securing IoT devices. So definitely excited about that. See what happens in the next couple of months. So Greg, what about you? What is your thoughts on the future of IoT device security?
Well, Scott and I have had this conversation about Ubrick before, and I think it's a great opportunity, right? For us and for deploying these types of sensors in some of our customer environments, especially with large, vast security environments that we have with enterprise level customers. The more complex they get, the more we need a tool like this to kind of define how safe and how secure they are and identify some of these gaps. So that's really positive and really impressive. So congrats to you guys and congrats to the entire ProSecure team. From our perspective, we're looking at new ways to innovate every day and looking at new ways to involve new technologies, right? 5G for one is going to be a large catalyst. We've had that conversation before as well. But 5G will be a really impressive advancement in terms of how we can connect to these types of sensors, especially some of our video sensors, some of our video cameras and surveillance cameras, because it'll allow us to actually capture more video and move more video over the internet now than we've ever done before. So very exciting.
Yeah, good stuff, Greg. So I guess just any final thoughts for our viewers today? We'll start with Greg. Anything you want to impart to them?
Well, let's actually hold up here for a second, Pete, because I think we've got a couple questions that are coming in here.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. Bill, doesn't matter which one you want to throw up first. It's fine. Okay, so I see this is from Vincent here. What blockchain is being used or looked at? Good question. So we're actually using the public blockchain. I'm more than happy if you'd like, Vincent. I'll reach out to you after this LinkedIn session here is completed, and maybe set up a quick conversation with you on it, and we can go into a little bit more details around that. But that's a good question. Up until this point here today, with what we're looking to publicly announce and talk about here today, that's pretty much all I can talk about. But let's have a separate conversation around that. That's great.
Any other questions from our viewers, Scott?
Yeah, it looks like here, Michael. What were the determining factors among the top 3 candidates that differentiated the winner versus the other 2 companies? Great question. So Ubrick and us actually created a press release about this about, I want to say 2 weeks ago. It was October 1st that we made the selection. So again, we had 3 companies that came in to give the pitch. 2 of the companies, they had a very good approach of doing things, and we were actually pretty impressed with it as well. But it only allowed for the security of the IoT device that stayed within a physical perimeter or an environment. So if that device became mobile and went out on the internet, you didn't have the capability of of being able to establish that same level of validation of trust. Whereas the Ubrick solution it didn't matter where it was at. It was able to you can implant it on a SIM chip. It doesn't matter where the device is, as long as it has an internet connection somewhere, I can begin to evaluate it for trust. I can ensure the encryption of the data, as well as ensuring that it connects into the public blockchain ledger and validates the attributes, and that we can validate that, okay, yes, this device and this person logged in at this date and time sent this piece of information in this data stream. So that was really the differentiator that we saw, and which is why we partnered with Ubrick. Great question, Michael. And Vincent, thank you for that as well too. Looking forward to chatting with you here in a little bit.
Perfect. Bill Bowman, any other questions from our viewers? No? Okay. All right. So getting back to my question. So any final parting words for our viewers, Scott?
No, I mean, I just think that, look, Pete, you laid it out pretty well at the beginning of this. The future is IoT devices. We're starting to see an exponential increase in the adoption of those already. Look, Pete, we all live in the New York metropolitan area. 5G just became a reality here a couple weeks ago. It's going to be like that over the next couple of years as it's rolled out across the planet. And that's really the catalyst for the adoption of these technologies, and real businesses will begin to really fully utilize IoT systems. And as the more businesses become dependent upon and reliant upon these systems in order to ensure that they're able to effectively deliver services, the more they're dependent on that these devices are in fact doing what they say they're doing and are not being disrupted at all. So any disruption or loss of trust to these devices will directly impact the business. Today we're seeing this adoption of these security services are being done today, specifically in the utility and critical infrastructure
Right.
field.
Yeah.
That's a serious thing. I mean, Christ, what happens if the utility grid goes down, or if wastewater gets backed up? That's a big issue right now. So those industries see the issues and are making investments in them, but not a lot of other businesses are making investments in them today. But we know that's going to change, and we know that's going to change soon. I don't know if it's going to be in 6 months or a year or 2 years. But I do know one thing. I know that Cipher will be there with a state-of-the-art solution to be able to secure businesses when they need it.
Great, thanks, Scott. And Greg, any final words for our viewers from you?
Well, I think Scott did a great job summarizing that. But
he really yeah. So ditto.
Maybe Greg,
ditto. Yeah, exactly. No, in all seriousness, I appreciate that, Scott. That was fantastic. Just to kind of echo that, I see the continual growth of IoT and the opportunity to provide more ROI in terms of that investment, right? We're now learning how to leverage that data, right? So as we move closer to the edge, as we get more data, we can apply some of the other AI models that we have to this, right, and really expand that. We can become proactive instead of reactionary, right? Which is huge for a lot of large businesses. Everything from environmental sensors down to different robotics that we can use to leverage in security infrastructures is really unique and provides a huge value. So we're excited for the growth. We're excited for 5G. We're excited for all the new advancements and especially all the things that you guys are doing. So we're excited for the future.
Yeah, thanks, Greg, for that. And Cipher is looking forward to continue to work with Prosegur in this regard going forward. So thanks, everyone, for your time today. Greg and Scott, this was great. I hope this LinkedIn Live session was useful for our viewers. And for any of our viewers who are interested in Cipher or Prosegur services, please reach out to us via our marketing department, which we reached at marketing@cipher.com. Thank you.